What's up, all? Welcome back for a quick recap of today, July 13th, 2024 at Saratoga. What I did was I tracked my results a little bit differently. Okay, I'm tracking the results not only based on what I do over here as far as my selections, but now I'm going to start giving myself and you, when I do the videos, an idea of not only where the winners are coming from, but what my thinking is when I'm putting these numbers over here. And I know I talked a little bit about the eye test and, looking at your grid and painting a picture and everything, but I want you to see where I came from today. I had a pretty decent day with selections, and I want to see the black here is just what I did beforehand. I already had the picks in because I showed the video last night, but then, during the downtime when I had time before the races started, I went back and I took a look just to reassure what I did over here is actually making sense over here and I'm not missing something. So if you look at race 2, which is the first race I started at, the 2 horse was my top, but he scratched. Okay, the 2 and the 4 were my top plays, but I did not repaint the grid because this was actually a late scratch. Okay, this wasn't an early scratch. So what I did was there were only 5 horses left to run. The 6 I already had tossed. So what happened was the 4 and the 5 just bump up and become my top 2 plays there. The 5 did edge the 4 by a neck. But if you could take a look here, you'll see what I'm talking about. What I did was I leaned toward the early over here and the early late overall over here and second best in the overall class category, which was the reason why I had the 4 up there originally along with the 2. But this really isn't a good race to look at. But the 5 did win the race. And what I did was I tracked where on the grid most of my winners came from. Okay? So starting with race 3, if you look at here, I had the 1A on top as my solid A. And the 1A did indeed win the race. And he was pretty much across the board. Okay? He was in the early on top one time in early B. But he also shows up in early C, early A. And remember something. When these horses show up over here, it doesn't all mean they're going to be vying for the lead. What that means is they ran against a faster pace last time out early to the second call. And they were in a good enough position behind the leader or on the lead to put up good enough numbers here. That's what these here mean. It doesn't mean all 3 of these horses were on the lead in their last race. Okay, the past performances will tell you that. So after you do your grid, you want to look back. You look back at your past performances at maybe these 3, possibly 4 horses to see which one of them were any of them on the lead in the first call, second call, and then you can go back and determine based on what you have here by these numbers who might be the leader today. Okay, so if you got a horse that was blue in all 3 categories, blue, 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 let's say, in early A, early B, early C, and you look back at him and he's an E runner, let's say he's an E7 or an E8, and he's showing that he's on top, or I'm sorry, in the front on his better races, then you might look at him and say he's going to be the speed of the speed today. So there's different ways to really dissect the grid once you have it done to determine who your leader is going to be. And again, it lies on you're at the mercy of the pace line that you choose. But if you look here, the 1A horse showed early, second in final fraction and turn, and also the top 3 categories here. Okay, the 4th race was a 7 furlong, and I'm also going to start putting the distance and the surface down too. This was 1 mile on the turf. And this is not a good enough sample size today to start developing a bias. Okay, but as I'm able to track more results this way and take a look at the actual distance and the surface, I'll be able to determine what's working on my grid based on the surface and the distance. So if you look at 4, the 2 horse, again, I had the 2 and the 3 as my top 2 plays. The race did come out 2-3. And again, this was a sprint race on the dirt, 7 furlongs, 1 turn. And this horse did dominate 2 of the 3 categories on the early side. And he was second. As you can see, the shade of yellow represents second. Or actually, yeah, the shade of green. So he was really third in fraction and turn, which means his early was enough to get him to the wire. And then he did show up first and seconds over here, early, late, overall. And then the overall plus class brought him down. So this horse was actually moving up in class, as you can tell by the drop here in the overall number when I threw the class in. Race 5 was actually a route on the turf. I had the 3 in here as my third ranked choice, even though I have 5 horses listed here. I had him in the C category, and he actually won the race. Now, that could be for a couple reasons. One, my grid was wrong due to the pace line that I chose to use for this 3 horse. I did not use the most recent race on every one of these horses that I selected or handicapped today. As I said before, I'll go 2 back, I'll go 3 back. If the race is a mile 16th, and I have 2 races last out that were only a mile, let's say, and they were a 1-turn mile at Aqueduct, and here we're dealing with, a 2-turn today at Saratoga. If the 3rd race back was a mile 16th, that I know it's on 2 turns somewhere, I'll go and use that race. But sometimes, again, the further back you go, you're satisfying the distance factor, but at the same time, you may be hurting yourself a little bit on the current form factor as well. So that's a decision you have to make. And that's what's nice about using the double pace lines. But there's a issue there too as well. You use a double pace line, the race 2 back or the second race that you used in your pace line may not be as good as your last race out. And what happens is it skews them numbers there and brings the horse down a little bit in factor points. So here we had, in the 5th, we had a mile 16th on the turf. The 3 horse won the race. And he did have the best final fraction and second best turn to finish. And that's why I have it in red, because I did not have the horse. I identified this later on after the win. Not that I don't know if it's going to be anything of an indicator for me until we do more of these and I see more turf routes and I see a pattern where the winner is dominating in this F category or either of these 2. Then I might have to make a note on it and make sure I move that horse up a little further in my selections. And then here, the 6th race, we had a 5.5 furlong on the grass. I had the 1 and the 11 as my top plays. As you can see, the reason I had the 1 was because he dominated early. And then he didn't show anything late or even on the turn compared to these other horses. I shouldn't say he didn't show anything, but compared to these other runners. And this performance here was good enough to keep him in contention for the final 3 categories, which are really summative categories. But the 11 horse, my other choice, did win the race. And as you can see, the difference between the 1 and the 11 was the 1 showed good early as well, the 11 I mean, but he was also second in the mid and late factors, which put him on top in these 3 categories, and he won the race. And he was bet down. I think he was morning line 6-1, and he went off as the race favorite, like 5-2. Okay, we move on to race number 8. Race number 8, I put it over here by accident, was 7 furlongs, again, a dirt race. I did not use the 4. The one thing I did miss on this 4, where I could have used them, but again, I don't want to go 6 deep here. I just go by what my grids are telling me right now. The 4 did have the top early/late. And again, it's only 1 race. I can't say that was the reason why. Who knows? Maybe, again, I might have chose a bad pace line to use here. But the 4 horse did win the race. And that's why I have it circled in red. I did not have that horse, but I circled this late just to identify where the win came from. Race number 9 was a mile 16th on the turf. I totally missed that race. Okay, I didn't have the 10 in there. The 10 won the race. You could take a look real quickly to see where my factors are on the horses that I did pick. Race number 10 was a Diana, and this was what I was upset with. I played around with a couple different pace lines for this 6 horse. Okay, and I ended up choosing the wrong one, because what happened was I went back on my grid when the race was over, and I typed in the data for the other pace line that I was going to use, which was 3 races back, I think, and it actually put him on top in a lot of categories. And the 6 actually did win the race. The 6 edged the 1 in that race by maybe a quarter of a length, but I did have the 1 and the 4 on top there. But the 6 won the race, and again, that was my fault there with the pace line, but it was after the fact. And then finally, race 6, or finally, not finally, we have one more after this, but the 11th was on the dirt. And I originally had the 1 horse as my top play, but the 1 scratched out. So what that did was, and I don't know if I changed any of these. I don't think I changed any of these facts. Maybe I did, the colors. But that led me to the 5, 7, and the 8, because as you can see, I got early, second in 2 categories here. I got early, second in 2 categories, and then I also have the 8 horse here, and second, what do you call it? First in the category here, first in 2 categories on the 7. So I couldn't separate 5, 7, and 8. So what I did was I just put them all 3 on top. The 8 horse did win the race. It did start off my late double. I had a late double where I used, for $3, I played the 5, 7, 8 over the 9 in the next race, which I'll show you. But again, we have 6 furlongs on the dirt. Early. The final and the turn to the finish did not play a role. Dirt sprint. And these factors over here, once again, did play a role. And I'm, again, making notes of this based on surface and distance to see if I can start a little bit of trending bias. And then finally, the 12th horse, I said I used the 9 as a single. Even though I had the 1 and 9 up here, I wanted to play a $3 double. And I didn't want to spend $18, so I went and I forced myself to single a horse, and I actually singled the right one. Okay, I leaned toward the 2 blues, 2 tops over here early, and it was a 5.5 furlong on a turf. And again, turf and dirt, the early numbers here are prevailing over the middle here, and once again, it helps to show up in it helps to show up in three of these categories. Not just 2. Usually, if they're going to show up in the overall, they're probably going to show up in the overall plus class. Unless every horse in here is making some sort of a class move, where this number is getting totally changed by the time it gets to here. That hasn't been the case so far. So that's my recap. I don't know how helpful that is. I just wanted to share my results, more or less share what I'm doing now as far as before I'm making my plays. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these tomorrow, 7/14. I'm going to put the grids on the PowerPoint presentation. The link to that presentation is, again, or I should say Google Slides, not PowerPoint. The link to that presentation is in the description of the video. And as I mentioned last night, for those who are interested, I do have the pace progression model. I have it in book form. I know a lot of the viewers out there, or some of you, have the tutorial already. And if you dig back, you'll be able to find some videos where I talk about the target rating. My computer's a little slow right now. I'm trying to pull up a grid here. Just give it a second. Okay, the TR. Okay. So if that's totally foreign to you, and you are a owner of the pace progression tutorial, the video tutorial, just go back into my library and find a video that's titled Target and Ability, and you'll be able to find how to figure out the target rating. If you have any questions, you can email me. But the book version of the model does have a chapter on target rating, and it also has a chapter on class manipulation as well to affect the final overall number in this section over here, which is PP8, which is pace progression rating number 8 overall plus class. Okay, so again, I'm going to have, I'm going to put tomorrow's, I didn't finish doing them yet. I'm going to put tomorrow's grids on the slide presentation, and I'm going to do my highlighting and circling my reasoning as far as why I'm selecting my selections over here based on what I'm seeing in the grid. All right, thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you soon.